Welcome to the System Simplified podcast, where we feature top leaders who share stories on how to successfully systemize a business. Now, let's get started with the show.
Hello, Adi Klevit here, host of the System Simplified podcast, where we feature top founders, entrepreneurs, and thought leaders about systematizing a business. And this podcast is being brought to you by Business Success Consulting Group, where we create, document, and implement processes and procedures so businesses can grow and thrive. And today's guest is Amina Moreau.
How are you?
It's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Oh, you're very welcome. I am so excited to interview you because, as I said in the intro, I'm all about featuring top founders, entrepreneurs, and thought leaders about systematizing businesses. You totally match that criteria because you are, it's chronic entrepreneur, not serial entrepreneur. That's what you wrote on your bio, right? So you have a chronic condition here of entrepreneurship.
It is. It really is a condition.
Good, but don't stop it. I mean, it's a good condition. We don't have to now figure out how you have to stop it. This is great. Yeah. And, you co-founded or you founded 4 companies, exited 2. And now you have your new company that you're concentrating on is Radious, which is basically an online platform that turns residential properties into collaborative workspaces.
Yeah, that's right.
I'm so curious about it, and we're going to talk all about it because as you and I discussed before the show, this hybrid working from home, and it is a situation. How do people actually manage to work around it, and what do they do? And I'm very curious to hear about that platform and what you do.
Sure. Yeah. I could talk about it all day long.
Exactly. And we are. But before we get started, I want to give a shout out to Maria Porkvokskaya for introducing us. I did a great podcast with her. She talked all about creating that international platform for creative and architectures, and it's a great episode that you can also learn a lot from that in terms of how somebody can have a spark, an idea, and then create out of it an international movement, which is great. So I'll put that in the show notes. So thank you, Maria, for the introduction. So, let's talk about you now. Let's talk about your journey in entrepreneurship. And I'm going to kind of spoil the surprise, maybe. You did lead your one of the companies to win 5 Emmy awards, which is unbelievable. So we need to hear all about that.
Well, and I use the term chronic entrepreneur because it is a little bit of a, you have to be a little bit nuts to do this and also do it again and then again and then again, because it's tough, right? But it's also one of those things that tests your boundaries and also helps to bring something into the world that may not have existed before. And I love problem solving. And so, frankly, entrepreneurship was never part of the life plan. I was pre-med. I had a very predetermined path that I was supposed to go down. There were family expectations. And I realized somewhere along the way that while I did have an interest in science and biology and helping people, I wasn't actually in love with the idea of becoming a doctor. And simultaneously, I had started kind of a side hustle with a partner that ended up turning into a really successful company. And we sat down at one point, we're like, do we continue with our studies? Or do we grab this opportunity that seems to have both presented itself, but that we also co-created, and do this thing that is proving to be successful that also brings us joy?
And what was that? What was that endeavor?
Well, it was a film production company, which ended up going on to win those 5 Emmys that you mentioned.
Wow.
And it still exists. So it's been, almost 20 years since we founded that company. It was in a college dorm room, effectively, but we had an idea and we wanted to go after it. And as with most things, especially when they're expensive hobbies like photography or filmmaking, in order to make it sustainable, you got to maybe make some money at it. And so that's really how it all started. But our specialty was human interest stories, really getting to know who people are at their core, and then telling those stories for the world. And at first, we started out in weddings. And the way that we differentiated was, instead of just telling the story of the wedding day itself, which let's be frank here, almost every wedding is the exact same storyline, right? There's not a whole lot of suspense if you're just telling the story of the day. But if you get to who the people are, to each other, what their life goals are, and how even like the cut of the dress could be a metaphor for something that they care about in life, like you can dig really deeply. And that is what ended up leading us to get noticed by other entities outside of that sphere, the NFL Network, CBS Sports. We started doing some work with them because, let's face it, humans are everywhere and humans' interest stories are everywhere. We started working with them, and our first Emmys were with CBS Sports for a series of stories that we told in the football world, Army-Navy game and whatnot. And it was a fantastic experience. We learned so much and got to make impact, because it wasn't just stories about sports. It was stories about inspiration. And I do think that the world needs more of that. So the four previous companies that I started were all in the creative space. They were around either filmmaking or footage licensing or music licensing or education and how to get better at the craft of storytelling. And now Radious is a little bit of a departure because it's in real estate and future of work. But the thing that it does have in common with a couple of companies that I co-built is that it's also a marketplace. So kind of Airbnb style, where you have hosts and you have guests. Similar thing as two of the other companies that I started, the music licensing and stock footage, where we had people uploading assets and then, ad agencies and marketing departments that were then licensing those assets. So it's a similar type of model. So it's fun. It's a fun challenge.
Absolutely. That's fascinating. So tell me more about Radious. Tell us more about myself and the listeners. Like, what is Radious all about? How do you transform residential homes into co-working space?
Yeah. It really doesn't take a whole lot. Most homes are already great. Like, they're already conducive to work, because over the course of the last 3 years or so many people have been forced to work from home that they already made upgrades to their home to be able to work there effectively themselves. The model for Radious is very similar to Airbnb in concept, where we have hosts and properties that then get rented out to companies and working professionals who need a place either to work just by themselves, they need a work-life separation, or they need to meet with their teams once a week or something like that, and they don't want to sign an office lease for 7 days a week when they only need it maybe once or twice. And so we work with our host to make sure that they have things like whiteboards and meeting tables and a smart TV in case you wanted to do a slide presentation. You want these spaces to be work equipped, so it doesn't just feel like you're going to a typical, short-term rental, vacation rental. You're actually booking a space that's been optimized for work. And it's not overnight, it's just for the day. So why would you pay for overnight amenities when you only need a space, say 9 to 5?
So the host basically goes to work, they leave the house, and then somebody else comes in and works from home, but from another person's home.
That is definitely one way that it happens. Many of our hosts do actually live in the properties that they are monetizing in this way, which I am so happy about, because especially in a tough economic climate, we're helping families with housing affordability. They're able to supplement their income and subsidize their mortgage or their rent by, and it's harder to do that with an overnight platform, because if you wanted to do that with your own living space, you'd have to find a place to sleep. Whereas with this, because it's only for the day.
And the host can be at home, but they have like a quiet office, in-home office or bedroom or place where they can actually go and work, where maybe they don't have it in their own home.
There are basically two options. What you described there is what we would call a shared listing. If the host happens to be home and is maybe just renting out an office in the whole home, then it would be stipulated that this is a shared listing. Most of our listings, however, are completely private. So if you're booking it, you can expect to have the whole place to yourself. And that's either because the host has left for the day, or it's an investment property that's already on the short-term rental market and nobody lives there, but they're offering it up by the day to working professionals or companies that want something for like an offsite. Let's say you're doing a team building event. You probably don't want any strangers there. You want it to be totally private.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I actually participated. One of my clients invited me to present in an event. I mean, she had a retreat and she actually rented a house that was in Portland where for the day for her team, I mean, the host was there, but he was on the second floor and we had the entirety of the kitchen, of the living room. And he had like some kind of a basement where like an entertainment place where there were couches and you could sit there and have a discussion. So I've seen it happen, and I think it's a great idea. Now, do you have people that, let's say, for instance, somebody needs to work from home, but they have kids at home, or they don't have privacy, and they do need something more on a regular basis? Do you provide that as well?
Yes, we do. So, in fact, we have 3 different pricing models. So one of them is if you just need a space for next Tuesday, then just like booking a flight or a hotel room, you just go online, find a listing that suits your needs and pay with a credit card. And that's the extent of the commitment. So it's extremely flexible. The second model is a membership where we'll actually partner with an employer and they will contract with us to unlock our spaces for free for their employees. And so if you have distractions at home, you can book a space anywhere, anytime without having to ask the boss for permission or filing expense reports or anything. You can just book and have it taken care of because it's already been covered by the company. And then the third model is exactly what you're asking about. We've had a lot of companies who, when they're first trying out the service, they book a different space every time because they want to explore. It's kind of fun. And also, if maybe one week they're meeting with people in, say, one region of the city, but then the next week they're meeting people in, with people who live in another region of the city, then they can accommodate those needs by booking a different space in different areas of the region. But we've had several companies who started doing that ended up finding one space that they fell in love with. And they started asking us, is it possible to guarantee availability of this particular space, say, for the next 52 Wednesdays? Because we only need it once a week. So there's no sense in signing a big lease for 5 years for every day. Can we do that? And so very recently, just in the last few months, we've started offering agreements for that, which then gives companies and working professionals a greater level of consistency too, because bouncing around might be fun and it offers you greater flexibility, but there are some people that just want the same thing every time because there are going to be fewer surprises, right? You know exactly what you're getting every time. So we have all 3.
That's amazing. And is it nationwide or just in Oregon, or where are you located?
We are in the process of expanding to our 3rd city right now. So we started in Portland, Oregon. Our 2nd city is Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And we're working on our 3rd now. And we are eyeing the Bay Area for that expansion. The goal is very soon to be nationwide, and then shortly after that to be a global company. But, one step at a time.
No doubt that will happen. And I'm so happy that we are doing this interview because I will be able to brag that I interviewed the co-founder of Radious when it was just a 2-city platform. So, how did that idea come about? How did that spark the bright idea that this is what you're going to do?
It was the middle of lockdowns in 2020. I am an Airbnb host, and I have a unit actually right below my home office. So I'm sitting above it right now. And it covers about 2/3 of our mortgage. We rent it out on Airbnb. And my partner and we shut it down during the lockdowns because that was a safe thing to do. And we started talking about reopening it. But the one thing that was holding us back was the idea of washing strangers' linens during a pandemic. it just didn't feel like something we wanted to do. We didn't really want to put someone else at risk either by hiring a cleaning crew. So we just kept it closed. But we were saying goodbye to a bunch of income that we had been relying on.
Right.
And so we started brainstorming one day, is there a way to reopen that unit in a way that feels safe? And through our discussion, we realized, okay, well, in order to eliminate the laundry component, we'd have to get rid of the overnight side of hosting. But we looked into it, and there weren't any platforms that we could find that weren't basically vacation rental platforms, which are by definition overnight. And then it hit us. All of our neighbors were stuck at home with screaming kids and barking dogs. And how on earth does a working parent get any work done in those conditions? And we thought, well, what if we just upgrade our Wi-Fi and maybe get a sit-stand desk for that unit and just invite our neighbors to come work there, even for free, just as an escape? And Adi, it went gangbusters. People loved it. And then we started talking to other hosts in our community about it. And they're like, this actually solves way more pain points than just laundry. You know, parties happen overnight, not during the day. This is working professionals in the unit. It's not just some, random person that wants to be there for vacation and recreational purposes. There's less risk with working professionals. And then in the fall of 2020, when companies started making announcements of canceling big leases and embracing remote work for the long term, that's when we started seriously doing market research, talking to companies of all sizes. And the biggest need it was becoming clear that they were going to have was, how do we get together with our teams in person if we no longer have an office? Maybe we never had an office because we're a startup. Or we have an office and nobody wants to go.
Right.
And we thought, okay, we're really onto something here. So we got started.
That's amazing. Amazing. So from your perspective, what is how do companies can find balance between hybrid, remote, going back to the office? Like, what do you see happening in this entire realm of work from home, the WFH world?
It's so complex. Frankly, it's a big mess right now, this whole future of work conversation. Remote, fully on-site, hybrid, flexibility, frequency. There's a lot of terminology out there that we haven't, as a society, even aligned on. There's some people that are using the phrase remote work differently. Some people use it to mean away from people, and they equate remote work with being lonely, whereas others are using the term to denote being away from a central office, in which case you could be alone, certainly, but you could also be with other people. You're just not at the office. But because we haven't aligned as a society, we've added an additional layer of complexity to the conversation, because sometimes we may be talking about a thing and unwittingly talking about different things because we haven't quite aligned on the definitions. One of the biggest pieces of difficulty for companies right now is for a company that is stuck in a lease, let's say, or they've bought a building, they're disincentivized from offering flexibility or telling their employees that they can completely choose wherever they want to work, because they have all these sunk costs. And it's hard to swallow paying for all of this space if nobody's using it. But if you can't get out of that commitment, then what are you going to do? And we're seeing a lot of companies. I mean, when I say a lot, it's actually the minority, but it's enough that it's making the headlines and it's skewing perceptions. You hear about big tech calling people back to the office. Well, why are they doing it? Are they doing it because they really believe that productivity is elevated in the office? I don't actually think so. And the statistics, all the research actually shows that productivity went up when people were given more flexibility to work wherever. My hunch is that they're doing it. They're calling people back because they have all of these sunk costs and they have to justify it, which is unfortunate because I believe it's going to lose them talent. The most effective working professionals at those companies, they want to have flexibility, and some of them need it. Like there are some communities, some folks, working moms, for example, might need a little more flexibility in their workday. And if you start forcing them back even 2 days a week, that introduces complexities that a lot of people find untenable. And so it's an equity issue too.
Right. So what would be your advice? Like, what do you see? What do you think?
Yeah. I'll tell you what my proverbial crystal ball says. We're looking at a bell curve. It's a normal distribution where the minority of companies on one end of that bell curve is offering and going to offer fully remote work. Then on the other end of the bell curve is another minority that is forcing everybody back 5 days a week. The majority in the middle is now and in the future working on figuring out how to make hybrid work. And there are so many different iterations of hybrid. That's a whole separate podcast topic right there. There's so many ways to implement hybrid. But the biggest problem with hybrid from even just a financial perspective is that, let's say you're asking people to come into the office 1 or 2 days a week. That's going to work for a while. But eventually companies are going to look at their P&L. They're going to see that they're spending money 7 days a week for maybe 1 day a week utilization, because even if they force people back for 2 days a week, maybe only half of them actually come. So it equates to roughly 14% utilization. Can you justify spending millions of dollars on square footage with 14% utilization? It doesn't make financial sense. So what I think makes more sense is once that lease is coming up, don't renew. Simply don't do it. And instead, contract with a company that's offering flexible space terms, fractional office space. Because if you only need your people to be in once or twice a week, you should only be paying once or twice a week. And in my view, models like Radious, like co-working, and various other types of flex operators that are starting to surface, they offer the best of both worlds, where you can have that work-life separation. You can get your teams back together again. You can offer them flexibility without the exorbitant cost of paying for it every single day. So I actually see it as a huge problem solver.
Sure. Now, but would we always also have the problem of the culture, right? What I hear, I'm playing devil advocate, right? What I hear from many of my clients is that they're running into the problem of creating the actual culture without people being together in the same space. What would you say to that?
I would say 2 things. One, you probably just haven't learned how to do it well. It's possible, but it requires training and education. Mm-hmm. You can't just duplicate what you were doing in the office on Zoom. It just won't work. There are different systems that need to be put into place if you're going to be running a predominantly remote team.
What? Oh, good. I love it. What are those systems?
Well, and that really leads to my second point, which is just because you're remote, just because you may no longer have a central office, doesn't mean you never get together again. You could be getting together once, twice, 3 times per week, or maybe once a month, or maybe once a quarter, whatever you feel works best for your culture. But one of my biggest frustrations is that people generalize the pain points of working from home to remote work as a whole. Throughout the majority of the pandemic, working from home and remote work were synonyms, because we had no other choice than to work from home. And working from home is isolating. You've got distractions. Eventually, you might start feeling a little bit of burnout. But what's great as the world opens up again is that all of those pain points of working from home, they're pretty much just pain points of working from home, but not remote work as a whole. Because if we define remote work as just being away from a traditional office, well, you can work remotely in countless ways, including ways that are in person. And so if you are on a team that hasn't yet figured out how to build culture in a completely virtual setting, which is okay. Sometimes it takes time to catch up. Not everybody has learned those skills yet. Then leverage in-person work, but just do it on an occasional basis as frequently as you need to in order to foster that culture. But forcing people into it builds a culture of dictatorship. And people want autonomy. People want to feel like they have a sense of agency, not just over their work, but over their lives. And so if you force people to commute long distances to an office they don't want to go to for the sake of building culture, really, what kind of culture are you building?
Right. Those are good points. And I love the idea, the bright idea that you came up with. That's actually an incredible, that's how businesses start, right? I mean, that's probably like how you started each and every business. Like you had a bright idea and then you go, okay, how can we actually plan and create and materialize it, right? So how many employees do you have for Radious right now?
Our team is roughly 10 people now. And
all remote?
One thing that everybody is remote, but we do get together and we use our own spaces to do that and to develop those relationships. Because to your point, I do feel like relationships are accelerated, bonds are deepened much more quickly in person than in two dimensions. I mean, I'm really enjoying this conversation, Adi, but imagine we were in the same room together, it would be a whole different experience.
It's a whole different experience.
Yeah. And there's a time and place for both. But one thing that I'm really proud of as we build Radious as a company, but also as a team, is that we're also walking our talk. Our customers are facing certain challenges in this new work landscape that we are facing too. How do you build culture when we're a team of 10? We've got some people, that are digital nomads that are in a different country in Asia every time we talk to them, or are in Central America, or are in Seattle and we're in I'm in Portland. How do you build that culture, deepen those relationships? And so we face pretty much the same challenges that almost all of our customers do too. And so we can really empathize. And we're learning too. We don't have all the answers, but I do believe that the companies who make the effort to offer flexibility, offer people freedom, and learn how to systematize it so that it's efficient, I think those are the companies that are going to come out on top in the end. And those who relied on the old model are eventually going to fade away. It's going to take some time, but I do think it's going to happen in that way.
Absolutely. And you're ahead of the curve here in terms of definitely like coming up with that idea. And I think that platform people are going to use it more and more. So if they want to find out more, if our listeners want to find out more about the platform, where should they go?
Well, first of all, go to radious.pro, and the spelling and the link, hopefully we can put it in the show notes.
Absolutely. But yes.
Also connect with me on LinkedIn. I really enjoy the community on LinkedIn, and you can find me, Amina Moreau, and send me a DM, a connection request, and we'll chat, because it takes a village. It does,
and it takes bright minds, and it takes vision and foresight and willingness to look into the future and what will work and what will not work. And I think definitely what you're doing is on that path. So very well done.
Thank you.
But it was a pleasure having you here. It was a great conversation. I learned a lot, definitely very inspiring. So thank you so much for being a guest.
Thank you for having me. This is great.
Thanks for listening to the System Simplified podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.